This morning I thought we'll look at Jeremiah 16. Look at Jeremiah 16. We're taking each week of different, really there's sermons of Jeremiah, messages he delivered, and then were written down. So Jeremiah 16, I'm not going to read the whole chapter, just want to read 14 through 21. So Jeremiah 16, 14 through 21. All right, starting in verse 14. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will no longer be said, as the Lord lives, who brought up the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as the Lord lives, who brought up the sons of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the countries where he had banished them. For I will restore them to their own land, which I gave to their fathers. Behold, I'm going to send for many fishermen, declares the Lord, and they will fish for them. And afterwards I will send for many hunters, and they will hunt them from every mountain and every hill, and from the clefts of the rocks. For my eyes are on all their ways. They are not hidden from my face, nor is their iniquity concealed from my eyes. I will first doubly repay their iniquity and their sin, because they have polluted my land. They have filled my inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable idols and with their abominations. O Lord, my strength and my stronghold and my refuge in the day of distress, to you the nations will come from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers have inherited nothing but falsehood, futility, and things of no profit. Can man make gods for himself? Yet they are not gods. Therefore, behold, I am going to make them know. This time I will make them know my power and my might, and they shall know that my name is the Lord. All right, so we've looked at several chapters already in Jeremiah. We looked at chapter 3, which was this astonishing lesson that Jeremiah preaches about the incredible love of God, which even seems to violate the norms of his own commands, but such God is. He's going to love us. We looked at chapter 7 and the people's, the people's reliance on the temple and kind of thinking, as long as we got the temple, we're good. As long as we offer the sacrifices, what trouble could befall us? Misplaced confidence. Last time we looked at chapter 10, and it's where he's talking about the ridiculousness of idolatry and their practices. But this is a very different kind of message. Chapter 16, verses 14 through 21, this is a message of hope. This is a message of hope, because you can characterize the Old Testament prophets as having two kinds of message. One of chastisement, like here's where you need to repent and change because you're wrong. But then these incredible messages of, but here is what God is going to do. A powerful message of hope. So did you notice how he opens in 14 and 15? Such is going to be the story of what God does, that people will forget about what? Yeah, we won't even talk about coming out of Egypt anymore. We won't talk about the Exodus and the delivery from the Egyptians. We're going to be talking about the delivery from the land of the north, which is, if you were here for the introductory class, that's where Babylon is, up north. It's actually more east, but the only way Babylon gets to Palestine is loop around the Euphrates Valley and come down from the north. So he says, in the future, no one's even going to talk about the Exodus anymore as something great. We're going to be talking about a different deliverance. that's going to be where we really say, this is where God acted. This is where God acted on our behalf, right? So that's an incredible statement, because the kind of place that the deliverance out of slavery in Egypt held in the imagination of the people, Jeremiah is going to say it's going to be supplanted with a new story, right? I don't know, thoughts about that? Any? What about 16? So he's going to bring this deliverance. God's going to bring this deliverance from the north, all the places they've been scattered. He's going to be bringing people back. 16, behold, I am going to send for many fishermen, declares the Lord, and they will fish for them. And afterwards I will send for many hunters, and they will hunt for them from every mountain, every hill, from the clefts of the rocks. Notice anything?
I mean, the obvious connotation of Jesus and the making them fishers of men.
Yeah, right? When he says to Peter, Andrew, James, and John, I'll make you fishers of men, they're not like, never heard that before, have no clue about what you're talking about. They're going, wait a minute, we've heard that. This is Jeremiah. We're going to be out there fishing for lost Israel, right? Because that's the prophecy. Right? I'm going to need fishermen. I'm going to need hunters. Well, these aren't hunters who hunt them down and kill them. These are go find them and bring them back. Right? So yeah. So when Jesus says, I will make you fishers of men, there's a context to it. They know what that means. That means we're starting. Okay, now think about historically, because there's this theme in Israel's history of exile and return. Right? That's kind of a dominant theme. They end up in exile in Egypt. At first it looks like a nice situation until there arises a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. Right? Probably what happened, what we know historically in 1720 BC, the Hyksos, which were a Semitic peoples from the Palestine area, more like Turkey, had managed to conquer Egypt in 1720 BC. And that's probably the reason a guy like Joseph could rise to second in command in Egypt, because he's racially and culturally very much like the people who were in charge in Egypt. In other words, in that day, the Egyptians were under the rule of the Hyksos, who had come from the north and conquered Egypt, and they elevate, you're from our back, he's not Hyksos, but he's from the same area. That's probably how Joseph rises to power. So when you have that verse, and there arose a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, that's probably when the Hyksos got kicked out, and Egyptians are back in power. And if you've been buddy-buddy with the former rulers, you're now not in that position anymore. So the tables get turned. The Egyptians push out the Hyksos. Now, because Israel had been flourishing under this kind of fellow rule by other people from their area of the world, now the tables get turned and they're made into slaves. Right? The Egyptians are back in power. So that was their exile, even though they weren't kind of exiled there. They went there, but it became an exile. And then the return, right? Brought out of Egypt. So with Babylon, Jeremiah's been preaching, you're going to be exiled. This nation is coming from the north. And your reliance on the temple and your reliance on this and that is not going to save you. This is going to happen. But he's preaching also return. He's talking about the exile before the exile happened, but he's also talking about a return that will happen after the exile happens. Right? So there's this motif of exile and return. It's someone like N.T. Wright says that's the theme Jesus takes up in the parable of the prodigal son. It's a parable of exile and return. It's the same movement, except the prodigal son, which isn't really that different, exiles himself. Which you could argue, well, that's always what we've been doing. We've been creating our own exile. And then God has been trying to bring us back, right? So there's this theme of exile and return.
What chapter we are?
We are in Jeremiah 16, 14 through 21. So, but here's the problem. After 70 years in Babylon, the people start to come back, trickling back, right? The Persians defeat the Babylonians. The Persians decide we're going to have a new foreign policy. You get a new government, we're going to have a new foreign policy. And what we're going to do is repatriate these slaves we find here in Babylon, basically so they'll like us, right? You know, there's a change in regime. They decide, well, we've got all these different peoples that were brought to Babylon as slaves. We'll start sending them back. So little bands of Israelites start going back to the promised land. But you know what? It never really becomes the return from exile. Kind of half return, but not really, right? And so by Jesus' day, people are still like, we know the exile return, and we were promised a return, and yeah, we're living here, but there's been a succession of rulers, and we've never really returned. And so the sentiment in Jesus' day is, so why hasn't God returned the kingdom of David to us? Why is there no seed of David sitting on the throne? Why have the promises not been fulfilled? That's the angst, and it's a natural angst that everyone feels in Jesus' day. And the Pharisees say, well, what do the Pharisees say we need to do to get the kingdom?
Or rules.
Yeah, we gotta be super diligent, obedient, keep the rules. If everyone would do that, then God will return the kingdom. Right? There's different ideas. The zealots say, we just all got to carry a knife, and when you find a Roman, stick it in him. Right? And one of Jesus' disciples was a zealot, so basically he was a terrorist, right? Jesus recruited a terrorist to be one of the 12, right? Who believed in assassinating Romans soldiers whenever you could find them alone, right? So everyone's got a solution. So Jesus says to these disciples, come, I'll make you fishers of men. What do they hear? This guy's saying, this is it. This is the return. This is the beginning of the return. That's kind of halfway happened. Like, we're not in Babylon anymore, but it's never really happened. And Jesus is saying, I'm the one who's going to do it. And I'm going to make you fishers of men. But that's the backstory to that statement. It's not so much about evangelism. It's about, it's about picking up a motif from the Old Testament and saying, now it's starting to take place.
He's got a few things wrong, but we can straighten them out.
Yeah. Anything y'all notice in this? What about the hunters? Do you see any parallel with anything Jesus says? He doesn't use hunters, but what does he say? The shepherd who goes looking for the lost sheep. That's the same sort of thing, right? Hunting for them till you find them. And so Jesus doesn't say the shepherd will make an attempt, and if he can do it, he'll find them. He says he goes and looks for the lost sheep until he finds them, and when he does, he brings them home. There's no question of will he succeed? It is he searches until he finds them, and when he finds them, he brings them home. It's not like, well, what if they don't want to come? He doesn't entertain those kinds of ideas. So I hear both the fishers of men that he says the disciples, but also his stories about a shepherd looking for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's the hunter, right? That's the shepherd hunting for his sheep, right?
The Jeremiah version, though, it's not as clear to me. He talks, it's kind of mixed. There's some reconciliation with the Gentiles, sort of some unification at the end, but it sounds like he's kind of coming to, the hunters are, I don't know, I read it as he's stamping out their iniquity and gonna hunt them down. All the bad guys. Is that a misreading, or is this another time where Jesus takes that imagery and flips it?
Yeah, well, I think, the part starting in 17 where it's so I think there's a mixed thing. I don't relate it as much to the fishermen and the hunters, but it's more like he starts to, I think, address what a natural thing that people would raise. So if Jeremiah says God's going to do something new, it's going to be a greater thing than the Exodus. He's going to go find his people and bring them back. Yeah, I know what's been going on, right? Because it's like, yeah, but what's been going on, right? I think he's saying, okay, I'm aware of what's been going on. To me, that's 17. For my eyes are open to all their ways. I know where they are. I know how they got there. I'm not unaware of that, right? So they are not hidden from my face. Like, it's not like I don't know where they are. It's like I'm aware of where they are, how they got there, why they're there, but I'm going to go retrieve them, right? And I think then in 18, the point is, but not without purification. Because nobody wants them all brought back together with all the old problems. Right? So sometimes we think like there's a disconnect between a kind of redemption, reconciliation. Like that can't include purification. It has to include purification. Otherwise, how can I be reconciled to God unless he, as we'll use the metaphors of Jesus, unless he threshes the chaff from the wheat. But I'm, the chaff is the outer casing of the wheat. So we often have made that, well, the chaff are bad people and the wheat is good people. No, people are wheat and everyone has chaff. And so I think the analogy is I've got to thresh it all and I've got to get rid of the chaff so I can have my wheat. I think it's that kind of metaphor. That's how I see it. So it's actually part of the good news. And if we understand our own faults, then we would say, yes, please remove that. Because I don't want, as it were, be in eternity with these issues that bug me. Anybody got anything they'd like to be rid of? Like, I just hate that about myself. I hate that I keep doing that. Well, it would be good news if God says, and I will take that from you. Then you'd be like, oh, yes, please, right? I want to be rid of my impatience or I'm always being critical or I'm always worrying about things. I would just wish I could be free of that. Well, what if he's saying, I'm going to free you of all that. Like, I'm aware of this and I'm going to doubly take care of it. But the end is still, I bring you to myself. That's how I read it in a bigger picture. Does that make sense? Yeah. I think sometimes it's like Bonhoeffer talks about cheap grace. I think we want cheap salvation. We want a salvation that say, well, how about you just forget about it all, pretend it didn't happen, and just save me. That's not salvation. Nothing's cleaned up. I'm not asking God to be and have amnesia about my problems. I want him to be the physician because I've got illnesses. Deal with the disease, heal me of all my diseases, and then bring me to yourself. Well, that healing is a difficult process. Yes, please. It's been difficult being sick. I welcome the healing. So I think too often we've got this idea that forgiveness just like erases the past. You don't have to deal with anything. There's no reconciliation that actually has to happen. It's just instant, totally over with, and nothing resolved. That's I don't think that's the picture. That's why Jesus will talk about things like threshing floors and separating sheep from goats and stuff, because there has to be that work. You can't get to a good end by just ignoring the bad present. Does that make sense? And I think Jeremiah, to me, I would read Jeremiah from that perspective, right?
It's hard to unlearn what, the way
Right.
I was raised to read this. That process, you get the grace and the reconciliation after. But I guess the metaphor here is the kernel of wheat was always in there.
Yes.
You're still part of, the good thing is there. It's just, the good things are hard, and getting it out is hard.
Yeah.
I see where Derek's coming from though, because at least in the New American Standard, it says, I will first doubly repay their iniquities and sin, because they have polluted my land. They have filled my inheritance with the carcasses of the Teslas and their abomination. So you're going to prison for that murder, and it's going to be horrible in prison, but I still love you. It's, whatever. Which is not a real, to your the easy grace. Oh no, you don't have to go to prison. You didn't kill that guy.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a cheap sort of forget about it, we'll just pretend it never happened. And God isn't through Jeremiah talking about that either. But then what is the repayment? Often the prophets will say, I will repay each man according to his deeds. Okay, but see, we take that in such a negative way. We take that as punishment without restoration, like punishment for the sake of punishment. What if you take it in the medical sense? You will do for each person whatever their disease requires. Now, I'm not treating everyone with chemotherapy when they have the flu, right? I'm treating each sick person with the remedy they need. So I would read all those texts where, and Jesus will do the same thing, that we will answer for what we've done and God will repay us. Well, the question is, what is it that he needs to pay to me, right? What does he need to give to me with respect to where I am? So my sense of the repayment is, yes, I will, and that's where the doubly doesn't seem like it's harsher. It's more like it's thorough. I will thoroughly, why? Because they've been idolatrous, they've gotten themselves into all this mess. I am going to deal with that. But this is the good news. This is the good news that this is better than the Exodus. I'm bringing you out of a slavery. That's exactly what he's saying, because that's what he says at the beginning. He says in 14 and 15, this is going to be greater than the Exodus. What are you going to do? I'm going to doubly repay. Is he contradicting himself, or is that double repayment that deals with the problem so that they can be set free? Is that not a part of the setting free that's greater than the Exodus? But we have to change our mentality, right? We have to change the dualistic way we've tended to be taught to read these things. You're either going to get this or that. No, everyone's going to get this, which is the goodness of God, of their healing and what he has to do, and he's going to do it for each person with respect to what their need is, right?
What if that double is, it's not more harsh, but it's, that it's double, they're not just being exiled and taken from what they want to hold on to, they also have to let go, and so part of that exile is going to be in a place where they have to come to terms with how they polluted,
Right.
how they did that, and let go of that before they, instead of coming back and refilling it with all the same
Right.
stuff again.
And- And it actually happens. There is no evidence that after the Babylonian exile that Israel ever again engaged in any sort of large-scale idolatry. They were rid of it, right? It was gone. They learned the lesson. We're not going to do that, right? What did you?
Well, it's kind of like going on with what Dave said. I'm just wondering, there has to be a participation
Yeah.
on our side.
Right. Right.
Half measures availed us nothing.
That's an AA phrase. Yeah, half measures availed us nothing. Yeah, yeah. Everyone, AA phrase again. Everyone wants the softer, gentler way. I want to be rid of my addiction, but I don't want it to be too, I don't want to do too much. Look, you got to get serious. This is killing me. And if I don't deal with it seriously, it will kill me. So half measures availed us nothing. Right? We got to go the full all in.
Double repayment.
Yeah, so I think that's the sense. That's why the message starts with, this is the greatest deliverance. Now, the process is exile and return. And that's how it's going to be dealt with. Right? And then, because the very next thing after 19, which again, it seems like schizophrenia, like, what? Oh Lord, my strength and my stronghold. Well, you just said you're going to doubly repay us for, it's like, are you my torturer? Are you my strength and my stronghold? He's saying, when he says you're going to, he's going to doubly repay. He knows the problems. He's going to deal with it. You go, oh my Lord, my strength and my stronghold. He's praising God because God's going to deal with it. He's not saying, like, he is this awful torturer. Oh, but let's get back to, otherwise, which God are we talking about? Is the God, is the God in that verse the same, is the God in 19 the same God in 18? Is that somehow, how is that consistent?
I was going to say, it still feels, that your first reaction still feels like sinners in the hand of an angry God.
Exactly, because we have been so taught to read it that way. That's why most people still think the God of the Old Testament looks harsh, vindictive, mean-spirited, vengeful, and Jesus seems nice. And we love Jesus, but we're scared of this God of the Old Testament because we do that, right? And we all know we've done that. It's easy to see that way. I'm trying to say, if that's not the case, how can you say Jesus is like perhaps Jeremiah or one of the prophets? Well, because, and he's not saying those, harsh, condemnatory things. How is he like Jeremiah? Well, then we got to go back and say, if that's true, let's go back and have another look at Jeremiah, and maybe we're reading him too harshly. And if we're reading him, he says, I'm going to do this great thing. It's a deliverance you can't believe. I'm going to deal with the problems. Oh, Lord, my strength, my stronghold. See, if you read that consistently, you think somehow 18 isn't awful. Somehow it's part of the solution. It's the doctor saying, here's the treatment plan, and it's going to be rough, but on the other side, you're going to be healed. And you're like, oh, great, the great physician, right? Yeah.
So this is true. It's a true story. I'm relating something that is ongoing right now that, again, sometimes these classes just blow me away because I definitely was more like where you are, Derek. This is, all. But to what you said, Greg, this good friend of mine has a son who got himself in trouble with something bad and sat in prison for a year or two before he even got a trial. They finally adjudicated it. He's going to serve a pretty long time in jail for this act. But in that jail time, he has become an incredible minister for the gospel to the prison. And so he has survived because they're now kind of protected him, and because it was a bad thing that he did. And he's ministering to this, and now he's moving to the big prison, the real prison, and he's going in there in a role working for one of the chaplains because he, for the first year or two, has done this, and yeah, it gave me a chill talking about it. And, it follows exactly what you're talking about in Jeremiah. He probably can't be out in public right now because it was an addiction, and it was a bad addiction, and it got himself in prison because of it. And so he's being protected by being in jail. He's going to be ministering the gospel. So it is almost exactly the pattern you're talking about here in Jeremiah, or is it? Or at least I think it is.
Yeah, well, I would say this is the arc of God's working with humanity. This is what God's always doing. He's always doing this work
But
to.
God didn't want him to have that sin.
No.
But because of it, it's now resulted in this.
Right. The way to think of sin, and AA does this, it doesn't call any addiction a sin, and I think they're right. Because sin has become this pejorative term that we think we have willpower over. Well, that's a false idea. Pick some sin that you have and to try and will your way out of that. Right. It's an addiction, and it owns us. Whatever sin it is. I'm not talking about just substance abuse. I'm talking about anything. Gossip. Yeah, just will yourself to stop gossiping or listening to it. You'll every time you try and do that, you'll find yourself longing to hear the tidbit about somebody, right? It's a disease. The real metaphor is a disease. And that is not to say, well, you're making it less than... No. We're talking about how it functions in our lives. It's like having a disease. And you can't will yourself away from the flu either, right? You need some curative action. You need the great physician. So all sin is a disease. In the way it functions in our lives, it gets a hold of us. We can't beat it with our best thoughts or intentions. It's just an ongoing malady, right? So God is saying, I know their iniquity and their sin. I know the disease, but I'm going to doubly deal with it. And that's why he can say in 19, oh Lord, my strength and my refuge. Like I run to you for a refuge from what? From the sin and iniquity, the reason we polluted the land and did all this stuff. And you warned us endlessly for hundreds, centuries you kept telling us not to do it. We couldn't get rid of it. We just kept participating in the sickness. And so a refuge is where you run to when you're in trouble. This is the prophet saying we're going to run to God. We're not going to be afraid of God. We're actually going to run to him, and we're going to say, please fix me, because I can't fix myself. Does that make sense? It's like Baxter Kruger said. He said, when you understand the Father, you'll sit down right in front of him and say, judge me. Because you don't fear it. It's the solution. It's like diagnose the problem and fix it for me. I want to just be right here in your presence. I run to you for refuge. Why? Because I have an issue with sin. You're the only one who can heal me. So I run to you as the refuge. And you're the strength because I'm weak. I can't deal with it. You've got to deal with it. I've got to run to you.
I kind of look like this as he's the prodigal son.
Exactly.
The prodigal said, I'm willing, I'll go work in the pig pen at my dad's place. He treats him better than the place here.
Yeah.
And so in this circumstance, this person, he's going to have to be in the pen, but hopefully he does get out of prison, and then he's, hopefully has the restoration. But at least for right now, he ran back to the Father.
Right.
But unfortunately, he's going to have to still be in the pig pen.
And we all have to do the same thing. You just can't think of his situation. We all have to do the same thing. We have to become humbled about our idea that we can fix it ourselves. Half measures will do. No, we have to become humbled about, okay, and know that we've got a problem, and know that the work that God's going to do won't necessarily be instantaneous. Like, I would love to be rid of all my sinful tendencies instantly. That's not how things work. Paul wanted to be rid of his thorn in the flesh instantly. And what was he told? Nah, grace. I'll just give you the grace you need. He wanted it to be gone instantly. And of course, nobody knows what that is. I think that's great that we don't know what the thorn in the flesh is, because therefore we can make it anything. What's your thorn in the flesh? Well, my thorn in the flesh is very much a sin, right? Everyone, those are some of the thorns in your flesh. When you dislike them, but you find yourself unable to rid yourself of them, and you're pleading with God, please get rid of this thorn, and he says, I'm giving you grace. It's part of the process. It's why Richard Rohr says everything belongs. Yeah, everything belongs. Even our sins have a kind of role in our life. They teach us humility. They teach us reliance on God. Oh, we learn to hate them. We should. Well, why doesn't God just make them go away instantly? Because they play a significant role. If I didn't have any sins, I'd be the most arrogant person alive. I'd be up here telling you about how to fix everything like I knew, right? But because I have my own problems, I'm like, well, I got no easy answers. Anyone who's got easy answers hasn't looked hard enough at their own sins. Does that make sense? So this is why it's a part of the message of salvation. I think when Jesus tells some parables, like, okay, we're going to separate some things, that's not doom for some and not doom for others. That's we're separating what needs to be separated. That's got to happen. That's the only way you get to a better place. Okay, someone else? Yeah.
Satan doesn't leave you alone when you become a Christian. You just recognize him a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Instead of being beaten up for months and years by your sin, then you might recognize it in a few days. Oh, that's Satan aggravating me again. Worrying is my main thing. Worrying and judging other people. And instead of getting beaten up for months by that, I kind of recognize it in a few days or a few weeks, and I can rebuke Satan and move on.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Coming back.
Yeah. Oh, he's relentless. The temptations are always with us. Okay, I realize our time's gone, so I'm just going to finish it real quick, and this is real quick. So what happens, and this is incredible to imagine, to you the nations will come. To you, Israel, all the nations are going to come from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers have inherited nothing but falsehood, futility, and things of no profit. See, he says, you are going to be an example to the world of how not to be idolatrous. Because you're going to get rid of your idolatry that you've polluted the land with. You're going to return. Then you're going to be a light to the Gentiles, to all the nations. And your ministry is going to come out of your own healing, right? Henry Nouwen's book, The Wounded Healer. Nobody's a good healer unless they've been wounded.
Amen.
Right? Because they don't know how to deal with the suffering if they themselves don't know suffering, right? They have pat answers. It's never helpful. The things they say just make you frustrated, right? But he's saying Israel, so the nations are going to come and say, because of Israel and seeing Israel, they're going to say, our fathers, our ancestors gave us things of no profit. Our religions, our idolatry, right? They're going to say, can a man make gods for himself? They're going to say, no, you can't. We know now you can't. Israel's shown us the way. So it ends with then 21, therefore, behold, I'm going to make them know. See, I'm going to teach the whole world through you, right? This time I will make them know my power and my might, and they will know that my name is the Lord. So it's God saying, Israel, you will become my servant. For the sake of the whole world, you'll become a light to the nations. All of this is going to transpire through you becoming a pure people. And this is going to be a deliverance like nobody's ever seen before. Right? That's the message he's preaching. Right? Okay.
Wait, Greg.
What?
Carolyn is lady had her hand up
Oh.
the last 15 minutes.
Oh, I'm
She
sorry.
didn't blurt out like some of us, me and others do. So Caroline, please have the last word.
Yeah.
Carolyn.
Carolyn gets the last
I've got
word.
a friend Caroline, so Carolyn.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome, dear.
Very gracious.
I try to be gracious.
I was thinking of step 3.
Uh,
To make a fearless and moral inventory of ourselves. To really look at ourselves. And then when you think you've gotten through those, God opens it up again. There's always something.
yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's depressing.
It,
Though he slay me, yet shall I serve him.
yeah. Yeah. You're right. It's the only way to get healed. Again, I keep saying, I think people, too often in churches, I hear a very easy salvation. It's like, I want to be forgiven, and then we'll just pretend like nothing ever happened. But I don't have to deal with any of these patterns I've adopted and ways in which I think and behave. How about we just all be forgiven and pretend like, yeah, I didn't do anything. That's not healing. That's amnesia. Right? That doesn't fix anything. Right? I want healing. I want a doctor who will heal the root causes of my problems so that I am disease free. There's a way to get there, but it's a fearless moral inventory. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll stop there. Have a blessed week.